For the second consecutive December, NC State football will be celebrating a Holy Joly Christmas. Hallelujah.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? It's time to get locked in with Locked On. Thanks for making Locked On Wolfpack your first listen each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our opening Monday sponsor is FanDuel. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place just a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 back in bonus bets. Win that first $5 bet, and you'll get that $150 to play with on FanDuel. Happy Monday to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Tight end Justin Joly has announced that he will be returning to NC State football in 2025. I am a little bit shocked. I think probably the most shocked at how quickly this was announced. But boy, let me tell you, I am over the moon about this retention by the staff. Justin Joly was far and away one of our most dynamic pass catchers, athletes, fill in the blank. He was that for NC State in 2024. To bring him back amongst all the other returnees, he might just set this thing off.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And the biggest thing that I look at out of this is, we talk about Justin Joly and his ability and how he looked like he was a surefire NFL guy. You're seeing guys in today's world leave and try their hand at the NFL when we all know they have no good business doing so. We have quite literally seen players, both from NC State and other universities, who decided to leave with eligibility still on the table and literally tweet things like, I need a job sometime afterwards. Like that's a real thing that has happened multiple times. So to see a guy like Joly that we all knew, like, hey, this is an NFL guy that if he decided to go tomorrow, there would be a team that's out for his services. It really is a huge deal.
It's a massive deal. And we certainly talked about this a couple weeks ago on the two of us expected him to go through the NFL draft process at the very least, get all the valuable feedback, and then have to come to a very hard decision. So that's why I am a little bit shocked at how quickly this has come about. I mean, before bowl practices, he's going to play in our bowl game, and that just gets much more important for that matchup alone. But when you look at what Justin Joly had on the table for this offense in 2024, and of course, the two of us were screaming basically weekly that he was not being utilized anywhere near the amount that he should have. I think at the same time, it's like a lesson learned for what you saw that he can do, and then a challenge created for what you think he can be able to accomplish in 2025. Obviously, with all the other offensive struggles and having to go through the grind of a freshman quarterback, Justin Joly always served as that safety blanket for CJ Bailey. And unfortunately, it only came in like 3rd and long or 4th and long situations. But even then, he always rose to the occasion and delivered when called upon. A weapon like that on the offensive side, they don't grow on trees. NC State has not seen a tight end or really an offensive athlete like Justin Joly in quite some time. I would really equate him to like a Jalen Samuels type because he can do everything. If you wanted to hand the ball off to Justin Joly, I guarantee you he's getting however many yards you need to get. He can do it all. When you're looking at possibly the number one tight end in the country, I think he was the number one tight end in terms of contested catches yet again. Is that not the second consecutive year? I think that is. This guy is a freak of nature, and we could not be happier that he is ours again for another season.
Yeah, we talked about the continuity, and you're right. We have talked about, hey, he needs the ball more. But the reality is this. At the end of the day, you can never go wrong bringing back good players. Now, obviously, I would like those good players utilized in a specific way. I would like for him to get a lot of touches next year and whatnot. But I want to see it within a framework of an offense that makes sense, right? I don't want to see any more of this force-feeding a player the ball because he's a great player with like what we saw with KC this year where it was like, we just got to get him the ball somehow. We got to get him. And it's like, dude, get him the ball in the flow of the offense. You have a ton of explosive weapons. Is he one of your best? Yeah, but you don't need to force it to him. I look at Joly coming back next year the same way. And then here's the other thing about this that I don't think enough people are paying attention to. The ability to bring all these guys back is good from a talent standpoint, But when you talk about carrying over, you're talking about guys who will have had virtually an entire season with CJ Bailey as the guy, as your quarterback, and an entire offseason. So you're getting, in essence, 2 years of like, hey, these guys have played together and all that. And next year is going to be it's going to be a different feel offensively. Now, defensively, some things are still up in the air, still to be seen. But offensively, I feel like you've answered a lot of questions so far with simply who you've retained this offseason.
It's pretty crazy because there's always conversations about how a 1-year quarterback versus a 2-year quarterback in the same system oftentimes appear to be two different quarterbacks. How about returning 8 of your 11 starters on an entire offense? I can't wait to see the dividends that can potentially pay off in 2025. Speaking just real quickly on, we expected him to get that full NFL draft evaluation. I remember when we spoke to Joly last offseason, he came on the podcast. We were kind of asking him some of the things that he feels he still needs to improve upon, and he mentioned run blocking. Now, moving into next season, I still do believe that to be true. And if I had to guess, again, just a guess, I would assume that any evaluation he did receive back from NFL scouts or talent evaluators probably listed that as another thing to go into 2025 with, because you got to think they're not worried about contested catches. He's the number 1 tight end in the country at doing that. Not concerned so much with his route running because he's always getting into open spaces, seemingly with no one within a country mile around him, and then making plays happen after that. If you can get Joly to be a force in the run blocking game as well, he could just wind up the number 1 tight end in the country, point blank, period. In all aspects of the game, he could be the best tight end in the country.
Hey, listen, I'm expecting nothing less than a Mackey Award finalist year out of this young man. And I mean that with everything in my heart and soul.
Not crazy at all.
Warren is leaving, the guy who won it this year. Fannin, who probably should have, no, not probably, Fannin should have won it. The guy who should have won it, Fannin, leaving this year. I'm expecting at least a finalist type of season out of this young man because, again, he is spectacular in many ways. And we could wax poetic about all the things that he does well. I mean, you talk about the tackle breaking-est tight end in America. You talk about a guy who is consistent, like Grayson said, consistently open. You talk about a guy who when it's time for that contested catch, is going to come down with more of those than he will not. This is a young man that is he's phenomenal. He's phenomenal. There's no two ways about it. I'm looking forward to seeing him back in the red and white of NC State.
And last couple of things on Joly here. I also saw that South Carolina tight end Connor Cox, who's in the portal, was supposed to visit NC State, has announced that he will no longer be visiting NC State, but instead he's going to be taking a trip down the road to the Dirty Foot Club. To any Dirty Foot Clubbers that happen to be listening to this, you want to know why he's no longer coming to NC State? Because we already have the best tight end in the country. Not to mention Dante Daniels, who scored a touchdown in the Dirty Foot Club. He can come back next year. We also have Gus Ritchie, who is a flip from the Dirty Foot Club to NC State. He'll be a freshman this year. We're good on tight end. We certainly wish Connor Cox all the best in whatever career he ends up having, wherever that is. But there is a definitive reason that he is no longer coming to NC State. Justin Joly will change your plans because I can guarantee you there's no one else that's going to play snaps over this guy.
In the words of Kendrick Lamar, it's not enough. Few tight ends that'll really step, but it's not enough. Didn't they have some Nesbitt guy and some Copenhagen guy or something like that over there not too long ago? Oh, this is the best tight end room in the ACC. Nobody's tight end room. How'd that work out for you?
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, it's not enough. Step your cookies up, losers. Step your cookies up. But back to things that actually matter. Justin Joly is going to be fantastic. And, if I was a tight end, I was looking to get some burn in the portal, I wouldn't be coming here either. Hey, I'm all set, actually. I'm extra good. Y'all take it easy, but I will not be joining you all for a visit.
Yet another massive win in retention for NC State football. Certainly an argument to be made that it is one of the biggest out of anyone that will be coming back in 2025. But on that note, now NC State needs to put full steam ahead in pursuing players out of the transfer portal. We'll speak more on this after a quick word from our sponsors. Our first Monday sponsor is FanDuel. Tackle NFL action all season long on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in just one singular place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page that you place all of your bets. Head on over to FanDuel.com in order to join today. You'll get started with $150 back in bonus bets. That first pesky $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com in order to get started. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Middle portion of our Monday show. Want to touch again quickly on the retention. We talked about this in the post-game live on Saturday, talked about it a lot last week. And even since then, we've had more guys announce that they will be returning to NC State. So I want to go ahead and give you the complete list just to kind of conceptualize how crazy all of this is in a span of like a week and a half. So officially now returning back to NC State, you have quarterback CJ Bailey, running back Hollywood Smothers, linebacker Sean Brown, corner Brandon Cisse, linebacker Caden Fordham, corner Devin Marshall, running back / slot wide receiver Jonathan Paylor, nickel Tamarcus Cooley, safety Devon Boykin, wide receiver Keenan Jackson, wide receiver Terrell Anderson, nose tackle Brandon Cleveland, wide receiver Noah Rogers, wide receiver Wesley Grimes, wide receiver Jakari Collins, linebacker Kamal Bonner, place kicker Kanoa Vincent, offensive guard Anthony Carter, defensive end Isaiah Shirley, offensive tackle Jacarius Peak, defensive end Chapali Price, tight end Justin Joly, running back Kendrick Raphael, and now also officially on Monday, our punter Caden Boomkester will also be returning to state. That was a lot of names to read, and that's a very good problem to have. Again, just want to shout out Savage Wolves and One Pack NIL yet again. This is an outstanding effort to bring back all of your main contributors from 24 into 25. There are very few schools. In fact, really, I haven't seen any other schools by my estimation that have been able to pull off retention efforts such as this. We're going to have to see how some of the CFP teams do in the upcoming weeks after they're done playing, but this is an absolutely spectacular effort to bring back all of your main contributors from this year into next year.
There is no doubt about returning this much production means a ton. And yet and still, the question becomes, how well do you piece it all together? Because at the end of the day, I don't think the talent was a massive problem this year outside of the linebacking core. I think the linebacking core, especially after K Fordham went down and there wasn't much depth behind it, that just was less than ideal, to say the least. But I don't think there was any other group that I would look at and say, they're devoid of talent. They don't have the ball players to get it done at a high level, and yet the results are what they were. So, it's exciting to have these guys back. It's exciting. I'm never going to sit here and say, oh, no, I don't want good players back. I'm sick of seeing all these really good players. I'm never going to say that. I would say, temper your expectations. That's all I would say. Don't jump out the window with this thing. Because, again, it is great. It is great that this is, this retention is here. Because I don't think it's a sustainable or good way to build your team going virtually exclusively through the portal. I think that's a fool's errand. But with that being said, I do think that you will need a slight infusion of portal talent in order to keep this thing rolling in the right direction.
I think that's a great way to phrase it, because there should be some excitement from retaining all of your biggest contributors from one year into the next. But at the same time, I do agree with you, Kenton. I think expectations should be tempered. I don't think you should be looking at NC State to go to the ACC championship next year, or, place any kind of lofty goals for this team. Just let them work. Let them continue to get into the lab, grow together, and then work and see what we end up with come spring and the next fall. Just let it work. Let them go behind the scenes. Let them lay low in the weeds, stay quiet. They don't want or really need a bunch of media attention. They don't need a hype train. Just let them do their thing. When NC State does get in the limelight, even for just a little bit, things unfortunately don't really turn out for the best more often than not. So I would encourage folks to just let these guys grow. Let them stay in the lab, bust their tails, and then we'll see what we get in 2025. But on that note of the transfer portal, being that you have seemingly retained all the top guys that you wanted to retain, all of the efforts in my mind should now be heavily on the transfer portal. And we talked about how the offensive line, the defensive line, and the linebacking core are more than likely the top three groups that need to be addressed. It would seem that they are doing so. According to reports, NC State had hosted at least one offensive lineman over this past weekend. The public name is Teague Anderson of Utah State. And I believe they were also in contact with an offensive tackle from Michigan by the name of Tristan Bounds. I would hope and or assume that NC State should be able to land at least one of them. I mentioned before, offensive linemen get a hefty price tag slapped on them because all of the best ones, those teams don't let those guys walk. And so if you're NC State and you need to bring in a high-value target in the form of offensive tackle, I would probably guess you're only going to get one. And I think grabbing one would be good because then that slates probably 3 guys into your starting lineup. And then you hope that you can bring 2 guys developmentally up to play and create that starting lineup. We'll see, though. I would expect that an offensive tackle or offensive lineman of some sort will be the first get for NC State out of the portal.
Yeah, I agree. Offensive line and linebacker need to be addressed. I am not asking, I am demanding. Go out there and get some big uglies and go out there and get some guys that fill some holes. This is my plea. This is what I am begging. This is what I'm asking. If there is a deity that exists that's responsible for any or all of creation, please, by whoever, whatever they are, that is, whatever it may be, please go get me some damn linebackers. The linebacker play I saw this year, I struggle to quantify what I saw on film. And I mean that very genuinely. Grayson can vouch for this. There have been moments of watching film where I was legitimately perplexed by what I saw. I was trying to make out of it like, wait, what is he reading? What is because I'm okay with a guy, you're just not good enough. You show up where you're supposed to be, and the guy whose belt loops are a little further apart than yours say, hey, son, get out the club. No hats allowed in this club. I get it. Some of the things that I saw on tape this year, I was just like, okay. That young man needs to maybe never play football again. It's any NC State thing. He may need to, go into bodybuilding, go into, I don't know, podcasting, whatever. But that's not, football ain't your thing. So we need better linebacking. That's an absolute need. Offensive line, all of these skill position players in the world do not matter if you cannot keep your quarterback upright long enough to get them the ball. Hollywood Smothers being as fantastic as he is, Kendrick Raphael being as fantastic as he is, those two extremely good at breaking tackles, got breakaway speed and all that. Neither one of them will get to display it if you cannot open holes on the offensive line. So I think that those are the positions where I'm like, go ahead and cook. Go ahead and do something. Do something great in the portal.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think when you see how often Hollywood Smothers was able to be as an electric player as he is, that just quantifies the importance of getting mass movers. You need guys at the line of scrimmage that consistently win at the line of scrimmage. You need dogs. And Garrett Tujay, the offensive line coach, again, one of my favorite things about him is the energy that he injects into his players. You need offensive linemen. They're going to be quick on their feet. They're going to need to be aggressive and make life easier for both CJ and Hollywood and Kendrick Raphael. We saw how those 3, your quarterback and your 2 running backs, how effective they can be when they have time and space in order to operate. So there is no really 2 ways about it. The offensive line needs to be addressed as soon as possible. Again, the portal closes for players to enter their name here in 2 weeks. It's December the 28th. NC State needs to be very quick on their feet. Waste no more time. You've done what you need to do in the world of retention. Now you got to turn up the heat in the portal and make some shake. You got to make things happen here in a relatively short amount of time because you also have to remember you got a bowl to plan for. And that's coming up. I think that's also on the 28th, ironically, with ECU. So it's great to get all these guys back from 2024 and not have to worry so much about losing guys in the portal. But now you have to strike where the iron is hot and get what you need from the portal in the form of offensive linemen and more than likely linebackers. Coming up next, we're going to get into a little bit of a round ball roundup, our big picture takeaways from men and women's basketball. Now they are a third of the way through the schedule. This comes after a quick word from our sponsors. Our second Monday sponsor is the college football playoffs. It's that time of year and the college football playoff is back. With the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever before, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins on December the 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. This leads into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling against the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Last couple minutes of our Monday show. Now a little bit of a round ball roundup. Both men and women's basketball at NC State is officially a third of the way through the season. NC State men's team is now sitting at 7-4. The women sit at 8-3. Men's most recently suffered the loss out at Kansas. The women, the next day on Sunday, picked up a very impressive 30-point win over the Louisville Cardinals. Kenton, today we're going to get into some big picture takeaways out of what we've seen from both teams so far. Again, already a third of the way through the season. Give me your big picture takeaways from the men's first, and then we'll get into the women's.
I mean, the men, we kind of, I feel like I know who they are, but I feel like I could be wrong. Like, I'm not sure. I feel like, hey, this is just who MOC is going to be this season. But if he turns it on, this team goes from like middling to extremely dangerous in a heartbeat. His struggles are well documented. You know, we've talked about him here. Objectively speaking, he's not really doing too much well right now. But again, if he picks it up, all of a sudden you're looking at the X factor of this offense, taking it to another level. So we kind of know who this team is. It's typical Keats team, not a ton of size, going to get beat in terms of rebounding night in and night out. They just shoot a little worse too in terms of shooting from deep, shooting from the free throw line. So that's problematic. But this team is better at on-ball defending, at least from what I've seen so far this season, than any other Keys team in terms of they can get stops when they're not turning you over. So, you know, that's just my takeaway that I've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, you covered it pretty well there. I think what I said on Saturday, the guard play for NC State is my biggest concern as of right now. If MOC can't be consistent enough in both scoring and being a floor general on the court, not turning the ball over, it's going to be a big problem for the rest of the season. And I think you can also kind of loop Jaden Taylor into that category. Just hasn't been consistent enough to provide enough offense for this team of late, and it's really killing us right now. I think, surprisingly enough, everyone wants to talk about teams being so guard heavy, and that's where the bulk of the scoring and the consistency usually comes from. However, I think the front court is playing their best version of basketball right now. Ben Middlebrooks, despite having to go to war in the paint all day in Kansas, he had a really good game, and I think he's kind of coming on strong at the right time for NC State. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, I still have my concerns about the overall tenacity, but when he's effective, he can be very effective. So for the time being, if NC State can't establish enough consistency out of the guard play, I think you got to lean on your front court a little bit more than perhaps you are accustomed to doing. Feed Ben, feed B2H, feed Dontrez Styles at the stretch four. That's going to have to be your recipe for the time being before you get into ACC play, because again, it's coming quick. You got Ryder coming up this next weekend, and then ACC play is very short to follow after that. If you can't establish an identity of some sort, whether it be a good mix between guards and forwards or leaning only on forwards, or perhaps your guards do show up, whatever it may be, you got to figure it out and quick. And now moving over to the women's side, Kenton, what have you seen from the first third of their season that kind of establishes your expectations the rest of the year?
The freshmen are starting to figure it out. That team is going to get spicy. That team is going to get real, real spicy. I am telling you right now, I look at this team and I say to myself, you have your proven commodities in your Isaiah Jameses, in your Sanaya Rivers, in your Zoe Brookses, but you were going to need, in your Madison Hayes as well, but you were going to need some others, some other players to show up to the party and do good things in order for this team to be successful. And that's what we're seeing. Zam Jones has gotten better and better and better as these games have gone on. Her last game against Louisville, 7 of 8 from the field, 18 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, and a block. For those of you who don't know, Zam Jones is 5'7", and I think that's a very generous 5'7". Okay? Like, this is, I'm telling you, this team is that. And then another freshman, we've had injuries to the front court so far this season. We haven't had the former Patriot League Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year, but Tilda Trigger, how high is her ceiling if she can fully figure this thing out, right? Last game, you're looking at 10 boards, I believe she led all players in rebounds last game. The 6'6" Swede her and them, when they're being net positives and adding in to this team, oh boy, it's going to get dangerous. And all we need from our stars, from our main play, be who you are. Be who you are supposed to be. Because Sanaya Rivers is known. She's going to give you hell every single time. And I apologize. Sanaya Rivers was actually leading rebound with 13. But either way, Sanaya Rivers is who she is. You know she's going to give whoever she's checking hell. And you know that when she's going to the basket, it's going to be tough on anybody. You talk about Isaiah James, lucky lefty. She can do it all. And she does it with that little left-hand twang that kind of throws players off their balance a little bit. And Zoe Brooks, what can you say about her? But she is the jack of every single trade. She is a stat sheet stuffer supreme. So when you get those three being who they are, and then you bring along these freshmen, and then you consider we have a very, very high impact senior coming in at the center or power forward position coming up very shortly here. This team, boy, I tell you, they're starting to figure it out.
I think my concerns about the men's are the complete opposite about the women's, because the women's have elite guard play. When you look at Rivers and James and now Zam Jones, who was spectacular on Sunday, she looks to be the biggest name in terms of freshmen this year, kind of like as Zoe Brooks was last year. The guard play, I think, is going to have to do a lot of the water carrying for this team, but I'll be damned if they aren't doing a really good job at doing it. I think the front court for the women's team is going to be really thin moving forward, obviously with the injury to Weimar, and now Williamson is also injured. They're probably going to face some struggles when they face some teams that have a very strong front court. But if your guard play is that elite and it can be good enough to carry you regardless, perhaps you can still win a lot of games. But you come to expect out of a Westmore team, he's going to find a way. He is one of the best coaches in all of women's college basketball. We're lucky that he is ours, and he has a ton of talent on this team regardless, that they can still make a considerably strong run into ACC play. That'll do it for us here on Monday. As always, thank you all so much for joining us. Be sure to hit that like button, drop your comments in the comment box, mash that subscribe button if you have not already. We'll see you back here tomorrow for more on Tuesday. And until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.